Hey guys, it's Jessica, and welcome to my favorite video of the year, my top 10 books of 2025. I had such a great reading year. It was just an amazing year for reading, for the channel, for discovering new authors and new things about my reading, and I cannot wait to share my top 10 books with you. I have been so excited to film this video, if you cannot tell. I would love if while you are watching this video, you're thinking about your top books and leave me your top 3 books of the year in a comment because I absolutely cannot wait to see what other people have been reading as well. This is the best time of year. So now let's get to the thing you're here for. Let's go ahead and get started with book number 10. And book number 10 is going to be A Drop of Corruption by Robert Jackson Bennett. This is, I think, the only sequel on my list today. I do have a couple series, but this is the only sequel, and it is the rare example of a sequel that I think actually was better than book number 1 in the series. And let me explain a little bit to you about what it's about if you haven't started the series, and then I'll talk about what made this book so fantastic. So this is a fantasy mystery in the style of a Sherlock Holmes mystery. We have 2 main characters. Their names are Din and Anna. And Anna is the Sherlock Holmes style detective. She is very strange. She has a lot of weird hobbies. She's just a very unusual and also very funny person. And Din is the Dr. Watson of the story. And in this case, he is the one who actually does the investigating. He goes to crime scenes. He remembers things to bring back and tell Anna about, and then she solves the mystery from afar. And I did say this was a fantasy mystery, and it is set in a world where we have people who have had these body modifications done to them. Din is actually one of them. He is an engraver, which means that when he smells specific scents, it allows him to have almost perfect recall memory. He cannot actually forget things, even if he would like to. And this allows him to be the perfect observer for Anna and to allow her to solve these mysteries. And the world that it's set in is just really difficult to explain. We have strange plant life. We have giant creatures called leviathans that are very mysterious that also enable the world to have a lot of the magic that they do have. It's just a very unusual and well-realized world. And I have read so many fantasy mysteries, but it is rare that you find a fantasy mystery that makes it so the mystery is just as important as the fantasy. And in this case, they're very, very well balanced. The world building is excellent, but the mystery is also a real mystery. And in this case, I think the mystery in this book is a little bit better than the first book. I also think that we get to learn more about our main characters in a way that I found very satisfying emotionally. They were at a little bit of a distance, I would say, more in the first book. And in this one, they really opened up. And I am so excited to continue this series. There is another volume in this series supposed to be coming out at some point this year, and I think in June, but that might just be a placeholder date. So don't quote me on that. But I am so excited to read more in this series. It's definitely immediately become a favorite. And I do love Robert Jackson Bennett in general. He is one of my favorite fantasy writers, but he really did something very, very special here. I will tell you all that I am willing to put a full series on this list in one spot if I read the entire thing this year. And so there are a few of these on here. And so at number 9, we have The Witch Roads by Kate Elliott. This is a fantasy duology that came out this year. I think one of them came out in June and the other one came out in the fall. And you really, if you're going to read this series, I would recommend reading them back to back as one because the first book ends and then the second book starts up immediately where that one ended. So it does very much feel like one longer story that has been split into 2 parts. In this story, we are following Ellen, and Ellen is a courier who travels the witch roads, delivering messages and such for the kingdom that she works for. And she has a secret about her past that I will not spoil for you in this video. But one day, that secret, that past, comes back to haunt her, and she finds herself, through a series of events, on a road trip with a prince who is a very arrogant and basically all the things that you always see about princes in fairy tales. And they're traveling on the road, and one day they come across a mysterious tower, and she warns him not to go inside because sometimes strange things happen here. But he does. And when he comes out, he is not the same as he was when he went in. And so a lot of the book is going to be finding out what happened to him, finding out what is going on with the witch roads themselves, which are magical roads, which have the ability to block the pall, which is kind of like a spore-like infection that is infesting the kingdom, from infecting people. And I don't know if that sounds very exciting. I am not somebody who generally enjoys an on the road kind of story, but this one worked for me so well. The characters were extremely well drawn. I thought that all the relationships between the people in the prince's party were really well done. They formed a little bit of a found family that I found very touching. And I just thought the world itself was just interesting and it opened up at exactly the right speed. This is a very classic feeling fantasy. And if you are looking for something that's going to give you that classic fantasy feeling, I think that this would be a very good choice. There is also a romance within it that is understated and I thought just perfect, but I would not classify this in any way as a romantasy. It's very much secondary to the plot line. I thought it was fantastic. I don't want to describe too much of it because I think it is very easy to spoil. But if what I've said sounds good, if you love a classic fantasy, if you've never read anything by Kate Elliott, I think her writing is really good. And I just thought this was something that wasn't exactly like anything else that I've ever read before. I had a great time. And that's why these two books together are going to be number 9 on my list. At number 8, I have a book that I really do not know how to categorize it. Is it paranormal? Is it urban fantasy? Is it horror? Is it just regular fantasy? I don't know. But that book is Slayers of Old by Jim C. Hines. So this is the story of 3, the book says, retired slayers who are called out of retirement to save the world one last time. And I'm not going to lie, it is so good. It is such a great, fantastic, hilarious book. I would say that if you were a really big fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer or its sequel Angel or spinoff Angel back in the 90s and early 2000s, as I was, you're going to absolutely love this book because this book is clearly meant to be a little bit of a reference on those stories. How you're always having to save the world from yet another apocalypse. How you have these characters. We have a retired slayer, we have a half succubus, we have a wizard, we have, as you can see on the cover, kind of a funny little Cthulhu-esque cat. It's just very funny. It's just very funny, but also I would say very touching in some places as we look at these people who had these kind of wild and crazy youths who are called back to do this job one more time. And we see how difficult that can be. I don't want to spoil anything for you again because this is such a great book and I think I haven't seen a lot of people reading it. I would absolutely recommend it. It is so good. And you do not have to have been a fan of those TV shows I referenced, I think, to enjoy this because it's just a good, lighthearted, sweet time and I cannot recommend it highly enough. Number 8. Coming in at number 7, we have a book that came out of nowhere and shocked me by being one of my favorite books of the year. It is a fantasy mystery, the start of a new series. It is, of course, The Raven Scholar by Antonia Hodgson. In this book, we are following a high scholar named Nima, and Nima is someone who is very happy to just be a scholar, to live with her books and her research and not have to be a part of court politics or the politics of the various magical schools that exist within this world. The emperor that she works for has come to the time when he must step down and a successor must be chosen. And the way that a successor is chosen in this world is that the different schools of the empire send a representative each, and they compete in trials to see who will become the new emperor. And I know that sounds like the setup for a young adult series that you have probably read before, but I promise you that this is not like all those other books. At the beginning of the trials, as we are getting ready to start them, it turns out that there is a murder, and Nima is tasked by the emperor with finding out who did it and what happened and making sure that the trials are going to continue the way that they should. And there is so much more to it than that. I would not discourage you from reading this if you don't like trials, because it's not entirely about the trials, but if you do like trials, then this is definitely going to be a good one. It just really surprised me. I thought the writing was excellent. I thought the mystery, as I said, was a little bit lower down in terms of importance importance than the fantasy world building was. I think as a debut, this is not the author's first novel, but it is her first fantasy novel. I thought that it was just excellent. I can't wait for the next one. It ended in a place where I'm like, I must know immediately what is going to happen next. And I can't wait to read the next one. I don't know how long it's going to be before we get one, but if you have not picked this one up yet, it was one of my favorite fantasies of the year. And again, I cannot recommend it highly enough. I just thought it was so, so fantastic. At number 6, we have another trilogy that I read all 3 books of this year. And that trilogy is The Burning Kingdoms by Tasha Suri. First book here is going to be The Jasmine Throne. And I don't even know. I don't even know how to talk about this series in a coherent way because I thought it was doing something so different from so many of the fantasies that I read. We are following the story of 2 women, a princess who has been exiled from her kingdom because she refused to do what women must do when they are asked to by the emperor and burn, which means exactly what it sounds like it means, and a serving girl who has been sent to take care of her as she is imprisoned. And the relationship that develops between them, both a friendship and a romantic relationship, and the politics of this world. Oh, I cannot even tell you. I cannot even tell you where we started in the first book and where we ended up in the third book. Just such a journey. The 2 female main characters in this book are not always that easy to root for, but they are extremely unapologetic in knowing what they want and doing the things that they have to do to get it. And I have found, as you'll see in some of my other choices on this list, that that is something that I really, really enjoy in a fantasy series. I love seeing female characters be allowed to gain power, to want power, to do all the things that male characters are allowed to do in books and not just be relegated to being somebody's wife. This series is just fantastic. Yes, there is, as I said, a romance. The romance was probably the part of this book that actually worked for me the least. I didn't care that much about it. I was here for the politics. I was here for the magical system and the really interesting magical beings that exist within this world that I'm not going to spoil for you. It's just a really, really great, and I feel like underrated series. So if you have not tried it, I would highly recommend checking it out and giving at least the first book a try. My actual favorite book of this series is the second book. The third book was a slightly lower rating for me, but to be honest with you, they're all great. They're all great, and I would recommend the entire series so highly. And The Jasmine Throne, The Burning Kingdoms trilogy, just going to be one of my top books of the year. Right at number 5, we have the last series that is on the list. And you will be absolutely 0% shocked if you've watched my channel before when I tell you that number 5 is the Gale Song Trilogy by Shauna Lawless. The first book in the series is The Children of Gods and Fighting Men. This is a historical fantasy series that is set in Ireland in the far past, but it is historical in the sense that it actually contains real Irish figures from history, real kings, real queens, real events that happened, but seeing them through a lens that is magnified by the fantasy elements. We are also following characters who are part of several different fantasy races that are from real Irish mythology. And it's not a subject that I knew anything about before I went into this series. I didn't know anything about that. I didn't know that I had an interest in historical fantasy particularly, but I read the first book in this series. I picked it up on a whim at the library when I was there one day. I read it, and then I immediately read the other 2. I could not stop. I absolutely loved the characters, the politics, the battles. There are 2 main female characters in this series, and you will not always like them. I know I said that about the last series, but I'm going to say it like triple for this series. You are not always going to like them, and you perhaps are not always meant to like them. But I have never seen such a great portrayal of a character who is morally gray or perhaps even unsympathetic, but who you understand why she's doing everything that she is doing in this book. I always recommend this series for people that really enjoyed Game of Thrones because I think it has a similar kind of scheming and dramatic political structure to it, particularly among the mythological beings, but also among the regular political figures, the humans. And it's just so well done, and it will emotionally devastate you. It will probably send you to Wikipedia for a good amount of time to read up on your Irish history. And I can't recommend it highly enough. I don't think this series gets enough hype, and I think it needs to be up there with the greats of the genre. I think if you enjoy John Gwynne, if you like that style of historical-ish fantasy, then this series again is going to be a no-brainer for you. You're going to absolutely love it. So please, if anything I've said sounds good, go ahead and check out that first book. It is fantastic. Now we are to number 4. We have almost broken into the top 3, and I would say all 4 of these top books are really books that I think that if you have similar taste to me, you really need to be reading because they are just so close together. So any of these books really could have been number 1. And at number 4, I have not just a new release, I have a book by a debut author and one that I really was not expecting to be as good as it was. But this was one of my favorite books of the year. Second book is coming out this year. Cannot wait. The book is A Song of Legends Lost by M.H. Allende. And again, this is another one that I'm going to say has not gotten anywhere near the level of hype, of reviews, of buzz, or however you want to put it, as it deserves. This book deserves to be up with the big releases, with the books that everyone's talking about. And I honestly do not know why it is not. It is such a puzzle to me that this book is not the one that everyone is talking about on their best of the year lists, but I think a lot of people just haven't read it. So this is me telling you, you need to read. But what is it about? So this is a fantasy world in which certain people are able to call upon ancestor spirits and have them fight battles for them. It is heavily inspired, the author says, by both some African folklore as well as the video game series Final Fantasy. So when I said invoking spirits to fight for you, if you have ever played a Final Fantasy game, you know what I'm saying. This right here. But also not just that, not just these big epic battle scenes, but also characters that feel very real, politics that feel very interesting. A lot of times in a book that is, I would say, pretty action heavy, as this one in places is, it's easy for the characters to get lost. And from the very first page, in a book that has multiple POVs, I was attached to the characters. I cared about them even when they made terrible decisions. This was just such an amazing read and such a creative and unusual start to a new series. If you haven't read it, pick it up and give it a try. It is, I think, about 600 pages long, so it's not short, but it is worth it. It read really quickly for me. And again, I just think that this one needs to be up there with the top books of the year, and not enough people have read it. So my mission a little bit is to get you all to give this one a try because it was so good. It touched me deeply. I loved the magic. I loved the world building. Just absolutely one of the best things that I read this year. All right, top 3 books. Here we are at number 3. And I know I said it on the last one, but really sincerely, any of these 3 books could have been my top book of the year. I have just ranked them based on kind of how well I feel like the story lingered with me in some ways, but they're all such fantastic books and books that you need to be reading. And number 3, I know most people have already read this book, but I hadn't read this book. So this year I read Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. And you guys, everything that people say about this book is so completely true. It's also true that it is extremely difficult to talk about without being spoilery because so much of this book is about the secrets contained within it. So I'm going to be very careful. This is the story of Piranesi. Piranesi lives in the house, and perhaps he always has, There are halls, there are birds, the tides come in and out, parts of the building are sometimes flooded, and there is someone who visits him that he considers to be his friend. And that is all that we know. And the mystery of Piranesi and the mystery of the house, those are the secrets of the book that if you haven't read this book, you are going to want to find out for yourself. This book is extremely short and it's also extremely moving. It has so much to say about the things that are important to us as humans, the things that perhaps shouldn't matter. And it has just the most incredible atmosphere of any book that I think I probably read this year. It's an uplifting story in a way, and if you're needing something lighter or you're needing something that is going to make you feel better, this is the one that I recommend. I do know that some people have struggled with this book feeling a little bit confusing at the beginning, but I do encourage you to just stick with it because it does all become clear. Even if at the very beginning of the book it feels a little nebulous, but it's just such a fantastic book. Everything everybody says is correct. I know most of you have probably already read this book, but if you haven't, Piranesi is everything that they say. And coming in at number 2, we have another book that really surprised me. I wasn't even sure I was going to like it when I picked it up and I started reading it because it didn't exactly sound like something that would be my thing, but it was 100% my thing. And that book is Between Two Fires by Christopher Buehlman. This book is set in the 1300s during the Black Death, and it is a fantasy horror story. I see a lot of people describe this as a grim, dark novel, and I don't know. I don't know if I would quite describe it that way. It's the story of a man named Thomas, and Thomas, at the beginning of the book, is working with a band of mercenaries, doing terrible things in a plague ridden landscape. And they come across a young girl who claims that she has a greater purpose, that she has been sent by God, that the angels speak to her. There's a lot of mysterious stuff about this girl. And Thomas has not always been a mercenary. And I think he thinks, it's worth finding out what's going on with her. Maybe this is a chance to do something good. Even, maybe she really is a saint. And that's the setup of the book. They set off on a journey to get to the Pope to um, do some unspecified purpose. The girl says there's a purpose, but she doesn't know what it is yet. And as they travel across this landscape full of terrible things that have happened to people, full of terrible people, full of death and destruction, as they meet literal angels and demons, it reveals so much about what it means to be human, to be a fallible human, to be somebody who makes poor choices, and how we are all redeemable no matter what we may have done. And I absolutely loved it. There are a lot of aspects, I would say, of religious horror in this book. All of the religious stuff, all of the specifically Catholic religious stuff really worked for me. It was pretty clear that Christopher Buehlman, knew what he was talking about like the historical Catholic Church. I really enjoyed all of those aspects. I thought it was super well done. I just found it extremely moving. I just thought it was a piece like I wasn't expecting to be crying multiple times over a piece of plague literature unless it was just about it being sad that there was a plague. But it wasn't that. It was touching, it was moving. It made me feel like everyone has goodness inside them. And not a lot of books are capable of doing that. Who would I recommend this for? I think that people who read The Devils by Joe Abercrombie and loved it would also really love this book. It has a lot of really similar religious themes, although this is the literal Catholic Church as opposed to whatever's going on in The Devils. I also think if you read The Devils and The Devils humor did not work for you, there are places where this book has a similar sense of humor, but it's not as dense. It's not as thick. I think that this would give you what you were hoping for from that book that maybe the humor got in the way for. I personally did really enjoy The Devils, but I had to get used to the humor first. So definitely that's going to be my closest comp title for this one. I have read other books by this author, and I think that if you've read The Black Tongue Thief, which is possibly his most famous work, this book is much less voicey. The main character isn't going to make jokes and quips at you all the time the way that he does in The Black Tongue Thief. This is much more serious. It's much more intense. But I do think that if you liked that story, you're probably also going to really like this one. If you haven't read this one yet, it's independently published. It is just such a great and moving, and I think almost important story. It was one of the best things I read this year, and I'm so glad that I get to share it with all of you all, and I hope some of you are going to pick it up. And now we have made it to number one. And as I said, any of these top three books could have been number one, but the book that stuck with me, the book that I kept thinking about ever since I read it in April, it has not changed. It has been the same number one pick since then, and the book is Where the Axe is Buried by Ray Naylor. I don't know if I've seen a ton of people reading this book, and it is a difficult book to explain or talk about. A lot of people read The Mountain and the Sea, which is Ray Naylor's previous novel that is about super intelligent octopi. I have not read that one, but I will be reading it this coming year. It's on my 26 in 2026 after I loved this one so much. I would describe this book as 1984, but updated for modern day. It has a lot to say about AI. In this, we have governments who actually have turned over their governing entirely to AI prime ministers. And if you can imagine the benefits and the consequences of that, all of those are going to be explored within this book. And that does feel very plausible. And I think that's one of the things I liked about this book so much, is so much of it feels very plausible. We also have the Federation, which is a, I guess, Russia-esque, Soviet Union-esque country that exists within this world that has slowly descended into complete authoritarian control. And I really enjoyed the way that the author talks about that, the way that the characters who live in the Federation talk about that surveillance state, that they talk about how slowly they descended into the system, so slowly that in fact they didn't really notice that it was happening until it was too late to turn the tide. So if you've read 1984, I think a lot of the themes within this book are going to be very, very familiar to you. This is a more, I would say, human and realistic book than I think 1984 was. I think that if 1984 was a book, maybe you struggled with just the language or some of the characters, I think that this would be an easier read. It is a multi-POV story. We are going back and forth between different characters and different chapters. There are places where I did find some of the technology to be a little bit on the confusing side, trying to understand what this futuristic technology did. But in spite of those flaws, I still could not stop thinking about this book all year. It just made me think about so many things that I think are so relevant and so now in our world. And I just can't recommend it highly enough. I just thought that it was fantastic. Not enough people have been reading it. If you're looking for science fiction, for a dystopian, for something that is going to give you something to latch onto, to think about, this would be a great book club book. I think there are a lot of things to talk about in here and unpack. And it's going to be my book of the year because I just could not stop thinking about it once I read it for the first time. All right, so there you have it, my top 10 books of 2025. Such a fantastic reading year. So glad to have experienced it with everyone here on my channel, and I am looking forward to 2026. This is my last video of the year. I hope you all have a fantastic new year. Go ahead and leave me your top 3 books of 2025 in the comments. I would love to see them. I would love to compare notes, and I would love to get some books that I can start reading soon. And if you're feeling quiet, go ahead and leave me the axe emoji, which I did not realize was an emoji until I just looked up. Is there an axe emoji? There is an axe emoji. Leave me the axe emoji in honor of my number 1 book of the year, Where the Axe is Buried by Ray Naylor. I hope that you have such a great new year. I will see you all in 2026. Goodbye.